So these are really tough issues to wrestle with.
We need everybody to speak out, so yes.
What would we do differently?
And when we lose the environment, we lose everything.
I should also say that Piper Foster is going to be on our roundtable this evening, so any questions that you might have had now, we're going to take questions during that roundtable. So a quick note of housekeeping. Speaking of the roundtable, we have got one additional keynote. Carrie Dugan is going to be speaking at 6 o'clock, from 6 to 6:15, and she's going to be talking about DOE's role in our clean energy future. And that's going to go from 6 to 6:15, and then the roundtable is going to go from 6:15 to 6:45. All right. So an insertion of one keynote. So we're now going to switch gears a little bit and kind of go from energy efficiency discussions to looking at new sources of energy. We've got a keynote from Morgan Williams, who's the president of Biochar Solutions, and his talk is entitled Biochar, a step towards turning carbon liabilities into carbon solutions. Morgan?
Thanks, Ken. Okay, well, thanks for having me here. I guess in the effort to replicate some of what others have done when opening, I'm a 26-year-old entrepreneur here. How many people are either 26 or younger in this crowd? At heart, okay. You get my point. I came from the nonprofit research and development world, and for the last 5 years I've run a technology incubator to try to find some solutions to address industry's problems in the Mountain West. And after 5 years we found, well, maybe biochar is something that's worth commercially pursuing, and that's where I am today. So I'd like to share a little bit about what's going on there. So first, what is biochar? Some of you might have heard of it, some of you might not have heard of it. So essentially biochar is an engineered charcoal. So we're taking forest biomass, chipping it up, putting it into this machine called a pyrolyzer, which is essentially like a kiln. We're converting that with heat, and what comes out is energy, heat, and biochar. So biochar is a solid. It's about 95% carbon. It's very carbon rich, and it's used as a soil conditioner. So that soil conditioner has lots of interesting properties. So what can it do? These are some of the known things in the scientific realm of what's kind of known about biochar, and essentially it distills down to this. Biochar you can think of as a coral reef in the soil. So it's a physical medium that has some chemical properties and some physical properties that help it enhance soil quality. So it helps with soil water retention. It acts like a sponge for water in the soil. Microorganisms congregate on this physical medium to do all sorts of the wonderful things that they do. Some nutrients adhere to the surface of these biochars, and some of these charcoals can actually be engineered to filter out contaminants that are in the soil, much like an activated carbon. So a real key point with this is biochar is a carbon negative technology. We've heard about these carbon neutral technologies, but biochar is truly a carbon negative technology. And what that means is it is able to convert biomass, and biomass has been sequestering carbon through photosynthesis for its whole lifetime, storing that as cellulose inside that biomass. If that biomass were to either burn, all that CO2 would oxidize that it's breathed in through its whole life back into the atmosphere. If it's to fall over and microorganisms are to eat that biomass, the CO2 would go back into the atmosphere, and that's roughly the carbon cycle, what we're talking about. Now with biochar, the way that we're thermally converting that biomass, we're able to simultaneously extract bioenergy, as in either heat to offset natural gas, or electricity to offset whatever your electric is, whether it's coal or nuclear or solar even, and then take that biochar product, which is roughly a third of the biomass you put in, comes out as biochar, and sequester that in the soils for on the upwards of 1,000 years. And that's not the whole story. So that's just the carbon that is in the biochar. So this biochar, it's charcoal, 95% carbon. What that means is that 1 ton of biochar, which is almost solid carbon, when you think about what CO2 is and what carbon is, on a CO2 equivalent basis by mass, 1 ton of biochar equals about 3.7 tons of CO2. Now, that's not the whole story either, because since biochar has some properties that can enhance plant growth and enhance the natural accumulation of soil carbon, you are also getting a carbon benefit in building those soils. And what Lester was talking about, and soils are the red-headed stepchild of this whole thing. This is a technology that can address some of those soil deficiencies. It can also result in reduced fertilizer requirements. It can result in reduced irrigation requirements. And it can offset fossil fuels. And all those things mean carbon savings. So now the science says, well, we're pretty confident that it works, but now what? There's some significant market barriers to scaling up this biochar technology. One of which is just materials handling. How do we actually deal with this stuff at scale? It's been said and determined in some studies. The Journal of Nature last year came out with an analysis that said biochar, if done sustainably, can account for 17% of global carbon emissions. It can sequester 17% of global carbon emissions sustainably. However, the markets right now, biochar is just too expensive right now. Largely that's because biochar is focused on markets that aren't quite ready for the broad-scale application of this stuff. Broadacre agriculture, it's fairly low profit margin, and biochar, you need maybe 10 to 15 tons per acre. That's a significant capital investment to approach a farmer about, and maybe they'll experience a 30% increase in crop yield, but if they're growing something that's worth $1,000 an acre, and they increase it to $1,300 per acre, and they need to invest $10,000 to $15,000 per acre, that just really doesn't pencil out to most farmers in the near term. Biochar has also been a topic of discussion for CO2 sequestration and carbon abatement models. It's been in discussions at UN climate forums. However, there are really no robust carbon markets that acknowledge biochar at all as a carbon abatement strategy, and that's a future market potentially, but not a near-term market today. There's also some traction with developing world stoves. So you essentially can offer highly efficient stoves to developing world households where they can convert waste biomass into heat to cook things, and also char to put into their little plots that they have to increase some productivity. But that's such a small market that it really isn't going to bring this industry forward in the near term. So these are the wrong nurse markets to focus on. So an alternative approach, the approach that we're thinking of, is really to address some regional problems with regional solutions, and to develop high-value products with biochar in high-value markets. We're not counting on any carbon trading in the near term, and we're emphasizing both the generation of energy and biochar production. So what does a biochar market look like for the Mountain West? Right now, we're sitting on a huge carbon liability in our forests. The western forests are going to turn from a carbon sink to a net carbon emitter, which is a huge deal. 100,000 trees in Colorado and southern Wyoming fall each day, which amounts to somewhere on the order of 150 tons of CO2 per day. That's 55 million tons per year in Colorado and southern Wyoming forests over the next 10 years. That's a huge carbon liability. We're looking to convert that waste feedstock, or at least some of it, into a high-value biochar product that can be used for addressing some of the land issues that the West faces, including mining and oil and gas development. So legacy mining, there are about 500,000 mining sites in the Mountain West, contaminating 40% of the Mountain West's headwaters with things like acid mine drainage. That is a huge liability. It's causing serious issues. And these things are expensive to fix, very expensive to fix. In Colorado alone, it's about 1,300 miles of streams and rivers are contaminated with mine-liable toxins. Oil and gas development as well is something that is significantly affecting the land with, in some cases, some organic contaminants, but also it's improper revegetation of these sites. Those soils are largely in semi-arid areas that are very difficult to revegetate with conventional technologies, so some new things are needed to address that. So our work with biochar started very much in the research and development side. And what I'm showing you right now is a research project that we undertook about 7 miles from here at the Hope Mine, which is a historic silver mine. Now what you'll see on your left is what that mine looked like for about 70 years, which is a barren landscape. It was a liability to the city of Aspen. It's on Castle Creek, which is the city of Aspen's water source. 80% of the drinking water from Aspen comes from Castle Creek. And this heap, this pile of waste rock from this silver mine was slowly leaching into the river. The city of Aspen and the U.S. Forest Service, this is on U.S. Forest Service property, they were worried about a catastrophic erosional event that would bring this pile into Castle Creek and effectively close that off as a drinking water supply for years. In the scoping process, we started looking at this in June. We had a huge monsoonal event in July that effectively took 15% of the slope. In 2 months, we saw it go into the creek before we stepped on that site. So what we did is we installed with collaborators. We worked with For the Forest, and For the Forest is a local group that's really looking to develop some biomass markets and to address forest problems here in the West. And they stepped up to the plate and funded this, and we pursued this project. So what you'll see, I mean, the picture is pretty amazing. So nothing really has worked on this site in the past, and we installed a biochar with some additional soil amendments to create an engineered vegetative cover on that surface to contain erosion, to contain the leaching of metals that go into the stream, and we achieved that revegetation without irrigation in a year. So a conventional approach to reclaiming that site, just to give you perspective, you're looking at mine reclamation somewhere on the order of $1 million per acre to do an engineered approach. We achieved this with a little bit of tow engineering along the stream bank for $250,000. Using biochar, using a carbon liability that's in Colorado's forests, converting it into biochar and energy, using it as a soil amendment to install on this site to achieve revegetation. So here's some other pictures. This is looking down at the site. You can see right down into Castle Creek. That's what it looked like in last July. That's what it looked like in October, right when we were done installing it. That's in June, and that's today. That slope is 40 degrees, which is a very steep slope, very difficult to revegetate with conventional technologies. So we think that we've found an incremental market for biochar that might allow us to scale up technologies and to eventually lower the cost of biochar production, lower the cost of biochar blended products to move into the larger agricultural sector in the future. So the company that we have now, Biochar Solutions, it's attempting to vertically integrate. So it has equipment sales. Really right now we're selling that equipment to wood processing companies that are using milling byproducts to actually put into the machine to create heat to cure their wood products. So right now we're working with a company that spends $150,000 a month in natural gas to cure their lumber products. So we're offsetting that with the biomass that they have on site and simultaneously creating a soil amendment that has value. We also do just bulk production and sales to wholesale markets. We're working with soil blenders, multinational corporations that are soil blenders that want to create bagged products that you can buy at Walmart that contain biochar in them so that everyone can take a part of sequestering their own carbon, which I think is a really interesting way of doing it in a large market. Someone is perhaps willing to pay $20 a bag for 40 pounds of some fancy product that you maybe can miss a few days watering those tomatoes with. So that's something that actually has tangible near-term value. And we're also doing land reclamation contracting, and we're working with large mining companies that want to be able to participate, at least at this stage for PR, but that's okay incrementally, to address some of these forestry issues, the carbon liability that's in the forests, the land liability that they have, the toxin liability that they have on these sites, to incrementally work towards a robust carbon market. So that's that. Thanks for listening.
So these are really tough issues to wrestle with.
We need everybody to speak out. So yes.
What would we do differently?
And when we lose the environment, we lose everything.